Everybody, and welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. This is the show where I answer your questions about politics, regardless of how simple or complicated they might be. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So, this is the place where you can come and ask all your questions about politics, and you don't got to worry about getting judged or roasted or owned or made fun of whatsoever. Everybody is welcome here. Republican, Democrats, everything in the middle and everything on the outskirts. If you know nothing, if you know lots, everybody is welcome here. Nobody's going to get debated or owned or roasted. This is not a show for harassing and bullying people. This is not a show for fighting and trying to prove how much smarter you are than other people. It is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. So maybe there's a question you've always wanted to ask, but you worried that it made you sound like a MAGA person. You can ask that question here. There's no judgments. Maybe you've always wanted to ask a question, but you were worried it would make you sound like some sort of beta male. Well, you can ask that question here, and no one's going to judge you. Sometimes I get a little spicy. People are spicy at me in the comments, but generally speaking, I just try to answer your questions sincerely and accurately. And so go ahead and throw your questions in the chat and we will get to answering them. Everybody is welcome here. There's no fighting, there's no roasting, there's no debating. What's up, Mus King? Great to see you again. So, yeah, any questions about politics, just throw them in the chat. I don't have a Smash Brothers main, Crashy, so sorry. I did not spend a lot of time playing that game. All right, so yeah, any questions about politics, just throw them in the chat, everybody. No such thing as a dumb question. I am here to answer. It's the Rocketeer. Great to see you again. Says, did you see that Zoran did his inauguration at the same subway station the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles used to live at? Is that true? That's pretty funny. Funny reference there. Okay. Ill Creative One says, how can we get independent candidates on stage? You need ranked choice voting in order for independent candidates to have a chance. Republicans are trying to make it illegal. Democrats are open to it. So the best way to get independent candidates on stage is to vote for Democrats. Good to see you again, Fletch Lives. Logan Sleeth says, love from a Republican. All right, what makes you a Republican, Logan? Is there a specific issue or policy that leans you to the right? Let me know. Put it in the chat. And any questions that y'all have about politics, just throw those in the chat as well. Nobody gets roasted. Nobody gets debated. Nobody, there's no fighting here. No one's gonna get name called or anything, whether it's a cuck or a fascist. That is not what we do here on this show. So any questions about politics, just throw them in the chat and we will get to answering them. Logan, still waiting to hear from you about why you're Republican, my guy. John Abbott, great to see you again. Says, did you see George Santos has announced he's officially no longer an NYC resident? Mom Donnie is already reducing crime in the city. That's very funny. Logan says, I'm a Christian and I think that under President Trump, the economy was much better. Okay, Logan, do you think that being a Christian means that you can't be a Democrat? I mean, I was raised Catholic and it really seems like the Democratic platform is the Christ-like platform. And we can talk about the economy too, but that's obviously a bigger question. Let me know what you think about that religion thing. Daniel Winterbottom says, what do you think about almost getting a VP that is caught in the crossfire of the Somali scandal? So Daniel, I'm not sure if you are aware of this or if you are specifically here to put out misinformation. But Tim Walz had nothing to do with the Minnesota fraud case. It's also not the Somali case because it was run by a white lady. So it's extremely weird that we are lumping in Democratic politicians and Somali immigrants into a thing that has basically wrapped up 3 years ago and was led by a white lady. Tesla says it happened during his watch. Okay, so everything that happens under somebody's watch is their fault. So Republicans are responsible for 9/11, for Hurricane Katrina, for the 2008 financial crash. Like, is that what you're saying? Teslas? What's up, Giovanni? Hi, how's it going? El Toro Perro Loco says, when is New Zealand going to invade Antarctica? Excellent question. Okay. Dat Barber says, LOL, willingly blind to corruption. That's not accurate at all. It was under his watch that the woman who was responsible was thrown in jail. So there you go. Spider Kev says, but Democrats don't care about anyone but their wallets. That is inaccurate, Spider Kev. I'm a Democrat and I care about you. Tesla says, when it comes to billions of dollars, Okay, well, what about Trump stealing money from taxpayers? That is happening under his watch. Do you think that that is an indictment of Donald Trump? Dave says both sides of politics involved with money laundering. You know what? That may or may not be true, Dave, but there's only one party that is actively involved in it right now, and only one party that is trying to change the laws to make it easier to get away with money laundering, and that's the Republican Party. Tesla says not the same. Okay, well, so you clearly have a bias. You clearly just want to like Republicans and hate Democrats, no matter what they do. Cool. Daniel Winterbottom says, "Why are like 7 blue states blocking the no tax on tips and overtime?" I don't know that states are able to block federal legislation, so not really sure what you mean by that, Daniel. To everybody spreading misinformation in my chat right now, just let me know. I just want to let you know that I've clocked you. And if you don't ask questions in good faith, you eventually get booted. That's the only rule that we have here. Everybody is welcome. Spider Kips, who seem like a reasonable Democrat, but not most politicians. I disagree with that, Spider Kev. I also think that we should not assume that every politician is corrupt and a liar, because that just makes the most corrupt and the biggest liars. It gives them cover because it makes it seem like there aren't better options out there. Rocky says, "You not knowing shit doesn't mean it's false." I mean, okay, Rocky. Can you give me an example? JR says, "I think hamburgers and cheeseburgers work well with fries." That is excellent. Daniel says, "I thought the same thing, but I was looking it up this morning. They have the ability. I don't know. There's no other. There's no end to that." Riff Raff says, "Has there ever been a person like Elon Musk before? Someone so rich they affect policy?" Oh yeah, every rich person affects policy. Like Elon Musk is not the only billionaire game in town. There are 75% of all billionaire political donations go to Republican candidates, and that is not a coincidence at all. Okay, let's switch over to John Selfridge on YouTube. Great to see you again. Says, "What do you think if Trump wanted to protect the protesters in Iran, but wants to shoot the protesters in the legs here in the US?" I mean, obviously, this is just, you know, getting dog walked by Netanyahu into war with Iran. It is starting another war from the peace president. So now we're starting a war with Venezuela and Iran. It's just like, when is it going to end? All right. Shauna says, "How about Mom Donnie, the future Democratic, in my opinion?" Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what he does. And I hope that people remember that the billionaire class is going to try to torpedo him. And so if things don't go perfectly during his term, it's not necessarily his fault. Tesla says, "Your stats are incorrect on the donations to the political parties by billionaires." No, it's not, Tesla's. I know all the studies that you are going to reference, and they are misleading. Josh says, "I didn't vote and I won't vote in the midterms." I mean, I'd love to convince you to vote, Josh. Can you tell me why you think you voting is not a good thing to do, or why you choose not to participate in it? Logan Slee says, "God does not judge based off of politics. He judges based on if you are a good person and he loves you." Yeah, but I mean, I think an argument could be made that your politics might be a reflection of how good a person you are. If you knowingly vote for a political party that is going to increase people's sufferings by consolidating more wealth into the top 1%, like the Republican Party, and you do that just because you are a rich person and you want to have more money, then I believe that God will judge you based on that. Richard says, "Voting," he says, "if voting was real, Trump would not be a president." No, Trump is president because people voted for him, and not enough people voted for Kamala Harris. So I really don't. I reject the premise of your comment there. Inder Burra says, "What are your thoughts on having federal oversight for social media platforms before the election?" I mean, it's an interesting question. Like, I do think that social media platforms need to be regulated because they are basically misinformation and propaganda machines. They're currently in bed with the Republican Party so that they can extract favors from Trump and his acolytes. So I am constantly worried about the way that the algorithms are going to be making politics easier for Republicans and harder for Democrats. So yeah, some regulations would be good, specifically leading up to elections. Obviously, we want to avoid people with a lot of money, power, and influence being able to put out like last minute information to potentially change election results. And so maybe we should do what they have in Europe, which is like a moratorium before like the last month of the election or something like that, before so that sudden changes don't happen like that for people to lie, cheat, and steal their way into elections. John Abbott says, if voting wasn't real, Republicans wouldn't work so hard to stop people from doing it. That is 100% accurate, John Abbott. John Selford says, if you don't vote, you have just removed yourself from the discourse. I mean, I generally agree with that, but we're trying to be nice to this fellow and try to convince him to vote. Tesla says, what makes you saying an incorrect statement true and the articles I see prove you false? Teslas, this is the deal that I make with everybody who wants to go toe to toe on the data. If you send me a DM, then I will send you the information that I have. And then we can decide on whose information is more accurate. But I'm not going to do a tit for tat here on the live stream. Real Benda, great to see you again. Says Mamdani reversed executive order preventing New York City BDS against Israel today. Thoughts? I don't know what that means, Real Benda. Scotty Mac, great to see you again. Says Dave, Kamala's word salad against Trump bluntness both weren't great. I mean, Kamala Harris had to mount a presidential campaign in 107 days, and that is a impossible task. And so, I believe that we should have lowered the bar for her and raised it for Trump. Spider Cap says, why do you think some leftists were saying Kamala was just as bad as Trump? I think there's a bunch of different reasons. Tesla says, if you can't prove it, don't say it. I just said I could prove it if you sent me a DM, but you don't care about being proven wrong. You just want to spread misinformation on my live stream. So, you can dip whenever you like. So yeah, I think that there are some Democrats out there who believe that the Democratic Party in general is too far to the right, and so they often color them as being just as bad as Republicans or Republicans light. I think that's a wildly inaccurate and dishonest thing to say. I think that some people are potentially being paid to say that they are left wingers who think the Democratic Party is just as bad as Donald Trump and Republicans. Misinformation and propaganda is a hell of a drug. Tesla says, not at all. You're the one spreading incorrect info. I'm not going to DM you. You just said prove it. All right. Well, see you later, buddy. Okay. Lewis Will commentary says, what's your opinion on tools like Ground News that aggregates news from both left and right? I like it a lot. I don't see a lot of I think that what's important to recognize about the difference between mainstream media and right-wing media is that right-wing media is a lot less accurate, and we have plenty of reports on this, plenty of data and studies to prove this is the truth. So while I do think that it's important that you are getting your news from a collection of sources using some sort of aggregator, I don't care for the way that Ground News says that right-wing media is just as accurate as every other kind of media. Okay, Logan Sleeth says, what makes you think that Trump is just supporting billionaires and making people poor? Just curious. So Logan, it's a really big question that you just asked. And, the Starkey person inside of me wants to just say everything he's ever said and done makes me think that. But, if you just kind of look at the policies and the outcomes that have come out of his first and second term, it just makes perfect sense. Like the quote unquote big beautiful bill was a massive transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. Doge was cutting down programs in the government that were helping poor people and middle class since Ronald Reagan, and they've done it more and more and more each time. And Donald Trump was part of that. And when you cut taxes for the rich, you are making life harder for everybody else. So yeah, does that answer your question, buddy? There's a lot. There's a lot. There's a lot of data that I could give you to support that. Julia Vigor says, do you think Trump will come to the UK to help Nigel Farage near to the general election in the UK? I'm not really sure. I mean, what do the people who would be persuadable to vote for Nigel Farage, do you think that they would be swayed by Donald Trump visiting? Like, do they like him? Does that demographic tend to trust the things that he says? Max just says, do you think that the mixing of politics and comedy has hurt the political discourse? I don't think so. I wouldn't blame comedy for that. I do think that we tend to lionize stand-ups a little bit too much and trust them, like Joe Rogan's, Andrew Schultz's and shit out there, whose words are being treated as gospel, even though there are people who are very smart who will gladly point out to you all the ways that they are full of shit. if I'm gonna put blame on any one specific thing, it's billionaire campaign donations and super PACs and Citizens United. I think that is the thing that destroyed, the discourse. Okay. Oh, that's very funny, John Selfridge. Big Beautiful Bill is Trump's nickname for Bill Clinton, is what John Selfridge said. That's very funny. John Abbott says, this morning, Mamdani revoked all the executive orders signed by Adams after a September 24th criminal indictment. Thoughts on that? So one person in my chat mentioned a very specific thing that I don't know what it was. And so I'm not sure. I haven't dug into all of the very specific things that he did undo with his executive order. All I will say is that Eric Adams was an extremely untrustworthy human being, and getting caught doing massive corruption and then being, bailed out of jail by the president of the United States, and then you sign a whole bunch of executive orders. I find that stuff extremely sus. So in general, I'm going to trust that Mamdani doing that was a good thing. Ooh, righty, Airstyle, Happy New Year to you too. Okay, Max Just says, having studied in California, I fully understand the contempt many Americans feel for the left. I don't. Max, would you care to expand on that? Lewis Wilcock commentary says, as a British person, I don't like Nigel, but he is like our Trump and his party looks like it might win. I mean, that's a massive bummer. People should stop voting for right-wing parties. La 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 says, do you think there is a good party, like an ideal party that would help, or are both bad? Yeah, the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is a good political party. It's not perfect, but it is good. In addition to the Republican Party being way, 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 way worse. So it's not even a question of the lesser of two evils. It's good but flawed versus awful, shitty, terrible. Okay, Max Justice. It seems to be largely a moronic cult that is in many ways everything they accuse conservatives of. Max Just, I was born and raised in California, and I currently live here now. And so, I guess I would object to the idea that the left is a moronic cult. It seems like an ad hominem personal attack as opposed to, having anything specific. You're talking about this weird anecdotal vibe session. You just feel like the left is a moronic cult. It's not a very productive thing to say. My God. Max Just says, California seems a dreadful place that works for the very wealthy and those who depend on welfare. I mean, those are mutually exclusive, So you're saying that the California sacrifices the middle class so that poor people can live on welfare and the very rich can get tax cuts? That doesn't track at all, Max Just, because California has a progressive tax structure, meaning that rich people get more money taken out of their taxes than they do in other states, and the poor are taxed less in California, and the middle class are taxed less here in California. Max Just says, I am a German liberal. Well, I don't believe that you have an accurate understanding of American politics, Max Just. But I appreciate you coming on here and spreading misinformation. Okay, Elias says, are you a leftist? Yeah, I'm a progressive Democrat. All right. John Abbott says, the one getting all the news coverage was Adams's order declaring anti-Zionism to be legally treated as anti-Semitism. Okay, yeah, that's I can understand why some people might have an issue with that. I don't know the nuts and bolts of that policy specifically, but here's what I would tell you is that there is a movement right now to equate any criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. And I believe that that was Eric Adams's intent in signing that executive order, was to say that any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism. And I think that that is bad policy. It is anti-First Amendment, and it is also weirdly allowing yourself to get dog walked by the Netanyahu government because it's politically easier for you to do that than actually try to do something substantive. So yeah, I don't really have a problem with that. I know it probably doesn't look great, but again, I think that we need to be very specific about what anti-Semitism is and what it isn't. And criticizing the Netanyahu government is not anti-Semitism. Criticizing Israeli expansion into Palestine and illegal West Bank settlements is not anti-Semitism. Okay, Max Just says California fails to effectively maintain public order in major cities and destroys the middle class. Congratulations, Max Just, you're full of shit and you are out of here. I understand that you are a German, so I will just say I'll say this in your language. I fucked your mother. Rushy North says, "Why must so many politics the majority of their person? Why must so many people make politics the majority of their personalities?" You know, I think that this is a thing that happens in human beings as we are all growing up and trying to establish our identities. And sometimes people go really hard into one thing. I would rather have somebody make politics their entire personality than somebody make like a random celebrity their entire personality. And I have been restricted for harassment and bullying. For what? For blocking somebody? For saying in a hilarious German accent that I fucked that dude's mom? Complete and utter bullshit, guys. Right wingers hate that I speak the truth here. So I'm going to be starting and stopping and restarting my TikTok stream. So if you are watching on TikTok, please come right back, everybody. Okay. And on YouTube and Twitch, we are still broadcasting. So if you got a question that you would really love to get answered, now is the time to do it. And we are back on TikTok. So welcome everybody. Airstyle says, "Who cares about TikTok anyway?" I mean, the majority of my questions come from TikTok, Airstyle. So while I would love to have a more equitable distribution of of which platforms are taking questions on, it's like no question. I get way more activity on TikTok. So I do have to kind of, you know, what do you call it? I do have to do what I can to keep up them questions. Thank you, John. You have a great 26 as well. All right, welcome everybody to Ask Me Anything About Politics. My name is Jared. I'm here to answer your questions about politics. Everybody is welcome, Republican, Democrat, everything in the middle, and everything on the outskirts. If you don't ask a question in good faith and you just try spreading misinformation, you will get blocked. But everybody else, you are welcome. Ask your questions in good faith. Let's have some productive discourse about politics, and maybe we can get to the answer of some of these issues that have been plaguing our country for decades and decades. Fabio says, "Let me up." I don't respond well to orders, Fabio, and so if you want to be brought up, just stick around. I'm mercurial about it. Sometimes I bring people up, sometimes I do not. Muzz King, thank you so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. I very much appreciate it. So yeah, just put your questions in the chat, everybody, and we will get to answering them. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Everybody is welcome, regardless of if you are what part of the political spectrum you are on. If you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican, if you're something in the middle, if you're something on the outskirts, so long as you're asking in good faith, you will get a good faith answer. So TikTok profile says, "Why left is so violent?" Left-wing people are not more violent than right-wing people. According to an FBI study, there was way more right-wing political violence in America than there was left-wing political violence in America. And if you look at the people who actually encourage political violence, you find that it is almost exclusively politicians on the right and right-leaning content creators, as opposed to politicians on the left and left-wing leading content creators. Narciso says, "Why do bread buns come in packages of 8 while sausages come in packages of 10? Probably capitalism, you know." User a whole bunch of numbers says, "This guy has no idea what he's talking about." Yes, I do. Ask a question or I'm going to boot you. Okay, so far, great start to the live stream, everybody. We are here answering your questions about politics. So any questions, just throw them in the chat and we will get to answering them. There is no such thing as a dumb question. Everybody is welcome, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, something on the outskirts, or something in the middle. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So this is the place where you can ask all your questions. Nothing is too simple. You can be a political expert or a political novice. Everybody is welcome here. There's also a ton of misinformation and propaganda out there. And so let's all be part of the solution of getting on the same page about what our government is doing and what's happening in our country. Narciso says, "Now for real, why Republicans and Democrats can't get along despite their differences." So there's a bunch of different things going on there, Narciso. And number one, I would say that social media platforms are largely responsible for this. Number one, their algorithms are designed to encourage people to fight and incentivize people to fight. But additionally, social media platforms are really easy to manipulate if you have a lot of money. And it really helps the billionaire class if the voters are fighting amongst themselves. And so, they pay right wing content creators to start fights with left wing people, and they pay people to pretend to be left wing creators and get them to get into fights with right wing people. So, it is, yeah, it's not about the actual people themselves being shitty. It's about the billionaire class being shitty, about the social media platforms being shitty, and the right wing politicians who are benefiting from this being shitty. Okay, let's see here. Lucar Dracula says, "Are you in politics?" I know a lot about politics. Rit Ardastix says, "Do you think this is the beginning of the end for the U.S., or can we recover from the damage of 45? We can 100% recover from the damage of 45. What one person makes, another person can unmake, and vice versa." Gary says, "Most politicians are shitty in general, left or right." So I don't believe in saying things like that, Gary, because when you sort of like lump them all together, you're giving the worst ones cover. If I've got like 5 people in a room and one of them's a serial killer, and we're trying to figure out like which one of these people should we make in charge of our knives, and somebody says, everybody's violent, so it doesn't really matter who we put in charge of the knives. You're making it easier for the serial killer to get a hold of the knives. Heather says, "Is it cool that CNN is investigating Shirley instead of the fraud?" So I do think it's important that CNN is calling out Shirley for his misleading videos, Heather, because the fraud has been solved. Like the woman who did it is in jail right now. So the reason why this whole scandal is being drummed up right now is because Republicans are trying to scapegoat Democratic politicians in Minnesota and Somali immigrants. So yeah, the lady who did it is in jail. This kind of fraud is exists in almost every state in the union. So, it seems kind of strange to me. This hyper focus on it. All right, Julia Collins has a comment over on YouTube. We'll get to that in a second. Aristotle says, "Where do you stand on the current Minnesota situation?" You basically heard my answer to that. Aristotle, let me know if you heard it. Let me know if you want any clarifications. Allie, great to see you again. Surfside Scooter says, "Explain the billions lost and stolen." Sure. I mean, there was a white lady who hired a bunch of people to pretend to be daycare centers to get money from the federal government. Easy peasy. Heather says, "You have zero cred, that you don't question that at all, but maybe you get paid by Soros too." Congratulations. That is an example of a not productive comment. So you are out of here. Who or realistic contenders do you think would serve well on the ballot for the next election? I don't really have any interest in wish casting 2028. Let's all get everybody focused on 26 and get everybody focused on voting in the midterms in 26. Himsky says, "This man is weak." No, I'm not. I'm pretty strong, actually. Let's see here. Flat says, "Is the earth flat?" No, it is not. And Dolph in Corny, I hope that you are having a wonderful day as well. I love my girlfriend like a lot says, "Thoughts on states that raise minimum wage and what seems like the right number as a baseline?" I mean, the difference in prices is negligible. We should be raising the minimum wage because that is one way that we force companies to pay workers what they are worth. And that is one way that we stop corporations and billionaires from stealing the wealth that is created by the working class. I don't really have a strong opinion on what the exact number should be, because like if you track like productivity, then minimum wage should be like $30 an hour right now. If you track inflation, it should be a different number. So yeah, I don't really care. Alrighty, let's see here. Julia Collins says, "Now that the GOP has officially ended the Affordable Care Act subsidies, insurance premiums are going to skyrocket for tens of millions of Americans in the next month. Hopefully, none of them blame it on Republicans." Yeah, for real, Julia. It's not surprising that Democrats don't want to group themselves in with people like that. Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying, Julia, but I believe in a politics of inclusion. So, Gordon67 says, "Thoughts on the argument that Israel has a right to defend itself?" I think that argument kind of gets misconstrued into Israel has the right to settle and annex Palestinian land and build illegal settlements in the West Bank and treat Palestinians like second-class citizens. I believe that the people that are living right now where they have roots there, and so let them stay, whether they are Jewish or Palestinian. But something needs to be done about the aggression of the IDF against the people of Palestine. Something has to be done about Netanyahu and his extremely right-wing ilk doing war crimes and genocide against the people of Palestine. And I think step one needs to be us stop sending them money and weapons. RAND1 says, how long until this is a total authoritarian government? Might take by year 3 of this administration. I mean, they are definitely moving really fast in certain ways. And so, I'm extremely worried about that. I am buoyed by how well some of these elections have been going recently, and how activated people do seem to be by the crimes of the Trump administration. We are going to have to keep our foot on the gas. If we do well in the midterms, then I think we're in a way better position for halting Donald Trump's attempt to create an authoritarian United States of America. Danny says, do you think Trump will eventually be held accountable? He will if you and I do the work of making sure that he is held accountable. And that means voting for people who will hold him accountable. Okay. TFU Willie says, do you denounce the Somali fraud? I mean, yeah, I denounce any kind of frauds of, government programs that are meant to help people. And the white lady who orchestrated that fraud, don't know why we're calling it the Somali fraud, since it was perpetrated by a white lady, I am glad that she's in jail for doing that crime 3 years ago. I don't know why we're talking about this now. I don't know why we're blaming Democrats. Don't know why we're blaming Somali immigrants. The white lady did it. The white lady's in jail. It's kind of end of story there, don't you think? User a bunch of numbers says, disappointing that you think the fraud in Minnesota is attributable to one person, and now we can move on. I mean, find more people. Throw them in jail. Also, this is not a part of the Somali community. This is not Tim Walz or Ilhan Omar. That's my point. But please continue straw manning and putting words in my mouth. Man says, you support Trump? No, I do not. Period says, can I ask only about American politics, or do you know global politics also? American politics is my specialty. Depending on what country you're asking me about, I might be able to answer. But if you're throwing the dice, it is unlikely that I will be able to answer your question. Okay, the crewman says, why do they wear designer clothes and drive luxury cars? Why does who wear designer clothes and drive luxury cars? JT says, doesn't matter what race or color, fraud is fraud. Completely agree with that. That is why I am glad that the white lady who perpetrated that fraud is in jail. Slimer says, if the fraud is over, how come Minnesotans are still suffering with higher and higher taxes? Minnesotans are not suffering under higher and higher taxes. As far as I know, the people of Minnesota are very pleased with their representatives. Larry says, why is Trump still president? He caused the insurrection, partnered with the fellow with the island. Because Republicans are in charge of Congress and the judiciary right now, and those are the two bodies that could stop Trump's crimes or hold him accountable to crimes. And I think that it is one of a billion reasons why we should not be voting for Republicans ever again, because they are just watching it happen. They are letting these crimes happen. They are letting Trump get away with all of this, regardless of how many people he hurts, regardless of how many people die because of it. They are allowing it to happen. They are allowing the greatest theft of America's life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, the destruction of our economy, the destruction of our reputation, just because he's a member of their party, and it's politically easier for them to ignore all the things that he's doing than to do anything about it. Right. Robert Flombert says, I miss open border and genius of the Jill Biden administration. I see what you're doing there, Robert. So I'm going to ask you to maybe be cooler in my chats, because I'm not going to get into a fight with you. So if you want to have like a good faith discussion about politics, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just start ignoring you and then potentially block you. Cflon says, well, I think January 6th was a terrible day. I don't think it can be tied to Trump. Cflon, I completely understand people being skeptical about that. But I will say a couple of things. Number one, I am tired of this trend of lowering the bar for Republicans and raising it for Democrats. It seems like Republicans never get any blame and Democrats never get any credit. Democrats can never be good enough to justify voting for them, and Republicans can never be bad enough to justify voting against them. So I bristle at the idea that we need to be so fair to Donald Trump and examine every single word and how many times did he say fight versus how many times did he say peacefully, et cetera, et cetera. Here's what I think is the nail in the coffin for Trump being responsible for January 6th. We know from contemporaneous reporting that Trump knew that he lost the 2020 election. And so, what was he doing there? Why was he advocating for this rally, if not to stop the certification of the election, if not to install himself as the leader of America, forever? It seems very clear to me that he was responsible for the insurrection. I think it is likely that he and his team were pulling the strings and actually organizing it, though I don't know if that evidence exists. I'm just confident that it does. Okay, Gunrunner says no politician is good enough for us to realistically vote for them consistently. I disagree with that, Gunrunner. I don't need my politicians to be perfect. I just need them to be good. And Republican politicians are not good. Their platform is not good. Their history is not good. Okay, Shork says his continued denial of the election results and pardon of January 6th is enough evidence. Completely agree with that. XX Get Lil XX says, what are the best sources to do research on? I would just say avoid right-wing media because it has been proven to be the least accurate media you can find. And other than that, just use a good news aggregator so you're getting it from a bunch of different sources. Mila Mayhem says we need to vote in progressive young people. I like that. Let's do that. Slimer says, who have you spoken to find out that Minnesotans love our local government? I don't know. I read some polling, Slimer. Trailblazer says, is there a possibility of another too close to call election similar to 2000? Absolutely. 100% there is. I think that we're dealing with a couple of different things. I believe that the sentiment of America is anti-Trump and anti the Republican Party. I'm basing this off of polling, but also at devastating electoral losses that Republicans had in 2025, losing elections that they really should not have lost. Now, what are we? So that should mean a massive blue wave in 26. But what could potentially make it too close to call? The Trump administration could do things to try to suppress the vote, seize ballot boxes, intimidate voters, propaganda, misinformation funded by right-wing billionaires, social media platforms being the main place that people get their news, and those social media platforms appear to all be in bed with the Trump administration. All of that could be an issue, and that is the reason why we need to fight as though we are in a 50-50 race here. So yeah, do not be too buoyed by the our what do you call it, our successes in 2025. The work continues. We need more people doing the work, and we need more people doing the work. Slimer says, I grew up and live in Minnesota. We do not like the majority of our local government. Okay, well, number one, I have no idea who you are. You have no profile picture. You have no real name. You could be lying to us, even if you were a real person. And even if you're not lying to us, what you are talking about is what's called anecdotal evidence. So just because you see it in your immediate periphery does not mean that that is the case for the entire state. Josh G. Fishin says, tax the risk, but all my taxes have been increasing in my state and I am not rich. I'm really sorry to hear that, Josh G. Fishin. Obviously, that should not be the case, but I believe that part of the reason why we are feeling the strain of cost of living is because we have not been taxing the rich enough. And so, hopefully if we continue to tax the rich, then that will balance out somewhat and your financial responsibility in both taxes and cost of living will decrease. But again, Republicans are never going to do that. Republicans are not going to tax the rich, and they are not going to ease your cost of living burden or tax burden. Rand1 says the tax code is screwed and allows too many loopholes. Completely agree with that. Who do you think is responsible for those loopholes? It is rich people and Republicans. Okay, Still Smiling says left versus right is engineered hate. Corporate billionaires against the rest of us is the real problem. I completely agree with that, Still Smiling, but the problem is that the Republican Party is working with those corporate billionaires to do that. So yes, it is true that we should not be fighting amongst ourselves, and we should not be fighting other voters of different, political ideologies. But it is true that one party is better on this issue. One party is there to help the billionaires, do all of their shit. And that's the Republican Party. So we should be voting for Democrats. Alrighty. JP says people died on January 6th. Trump wrote a blanket pardon and pardoned literal murderers. That is accurate. Josh G. Fishin says my property taxes went up. They increased the gas tax and the car registration. Democracy runs. All right, John G. Fishin. See you later. I'm tired of comments like that. Okay, Larry says, why is the FBI covering up Trump's crimes? It's because Trump was able to nominate the head of the FBI, and he chose a guy who was going to cover up his crimes for him, named Kash Patel. It is one of a million reasons why the Republican Party has completely lost all of its legitimacy. They allowed Trump to sit at the top of the FBI, a dude named Kash Patel who had not the relevant experience for that, and also is complicit in a massive cover up. Okay, let's see here. Cflon says, my issue is a see politicians on both sides greatly increasing their wealth while in office. I completely agree with that, Cflon. And there are a bunch of mechanisms by which that happens. Not every politician gets rich being a politician by doing shady things, like getting paid a lot to speak at a college or Goldman Sachs or whatever, might be a little shady, but it's not illegal. Insider trading is perfectly legal in Congress. And so, yeah, I would vote for the party that seems to be trying to do something about that, and that's the Democrats. Cflon, do you not agree with that? Let me know. Rand1 says, two-party system screws us all, ranked choice, and eliminate the electoral college. I agree with that, but there's only one political party that's trying to make ranked choice illegal, and that's the Republican Party. So the best way through is to vote for Democrats, and then we can get ranked choice voting, and then we can have more than two political parties. Okay, excellent block, Carmine. You nailed it. David Porter says, lie after lie. Are you talking about me? Can you name one lie that I have told? All right, this guy says fascism is the best. That's a block. Congratulations. Ill Creative says, do you think gardening will be legal in all 50 states soon? I don't. I think it'll take a while for certain states to get on board. JT says, Democrats want to get rid of the Second Amendment. I just can't get behind that. That's not true, JT. There are plenty of states in America that are run by majority Democrats, and you can get a gun in any of those states. It might be a little harder than getting it in Arkansas or Texas, but you can still get, the same guns. So if Democrats have been in charge on both the federal and state level, and they have not gotten rid of the Second Amendment on the state or federal level, what is your evidence that that is something that they plan on doing in the future? It seems like that is not a real thing, JT. It seems like it's just right-wing propaganda. Steve Lon says, I agree the majority of Dems are against insider trading, just not the ones at the top. Okay, Steve Lon, so the way that we do that is we primary the ones on top and replace them with better people. JT says, every topic on ARs and rifles, Dems want to ban them. All right, doesn't really seem like you're responding to the things that I'm saying, JT, so you are out of here. Okay. JP says, I'm a veteran California, vote Democrat and support the Second Amendment. All right, there we go. Buzzed. Bertz, good to see you again, says, what do you think of John Fetterman? In my opinion, he's a mild Republican. Yeah, he ran as a progressive Democrat, and then he turned into a centrist Republican. And it is super weird. I don't know if him and Marjorie Taylor Greene switch bodies at some point, because she seems to be saying, more correct things than he does these days. So yeah, I don't know what's going on with that dude. Let's see here. Frank Ocean's fans are corny, says, yo, answer the guest request. No. Still Smiling says, both parties representing us have failed us, wasting our money, and our freedom system is broken. Still Smiling, so I'm getting a little tired of you not asking questions, and you keep on saying things that I think are demonstrably false. So I already went into how the Democratic Party is better than the Republican Party on this issue. The Democratic Party has a better history legislatively of taking care of people. So if you continue to spread this both sides misinformation, you're going to get blocked. Frank Ocean fans are corny, just called me a chud, so we're going to go ahead and block that person also. Ready. Carolyn says, then taking federal school money in work study. I don't know what that means. Ill Creative says, do you think cryptocurrency will replace our currency? I don't think so, and I very much hope not, because so far there's been no use case for crypto besides crime and money laundering. Julie Vigor says, what is your view of the new mayor of New York? Oh, I like Mamdani a lot. I think the people need to recognize that the billionaire class is going to try to drag him through the mud and torpedo his agenda. And so we need to be, we need to recognize that fact and make sure that we are not judging Mamdani too harshly. People tend to judge Democratic unfairly harshly, in my opinion, and they tend to judge Republican politicians not harshly enough. Okay, sociology doctor. Great to see you. Thank you for being here. Carolyn says, "Do you think it's stealing to deny students work study award?" I don't know what that means. What the work study award is, Carolyn. So sorry, I'm not up on that topic there. Rand One says, "Should someone with no governing experience be qualified for the presidency?" Um, that's a really good question, Rand One, and I think that like in the grand ether of ideas, I think that it is important that for Americans to recognize that every single one of them can be president. The logistics of actually becoming president make that a lot more difficult because of how expensive it is and how you need to get so much attention and you need the backing of various organizations and stuff like that. But idealistically, it should be that any citizen can become president. Um, Realistically, like, you know, how has this worked out for us, with having somebody like Donald Trump be president of the United States? Not great. I don't love, you know, just random athletes and actors and people just throwing their hats in the ring just because they think they're better, zero governing experience. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it's necessary for us to sort of like mandate that at this moment, but I do think it's something important for us to keep in mind as we cast our votes going forward. What is this person's governing experience? We want somebody that has governing experience, but that has not been in Washington for so long that they are completely entangled in, what makes government terrible, Okay, JP says work study is generally financial aid, but work in lieu of a cash benefit. Yeah, I'm just not up on that topic, Carolyn. So sorry. Okay, John Abbott says his policy and actions as governor, as lieutenant governor, were those of a progressive. His conservatism literally began the months following his stroke. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, it really does seem to be related to his stroke. Okay, Lyrical says, "Do you support the IDF?" No, I do not. I believe that the Netanyahu government is guilty of doing war crimes and genocide against the people of Palestine, and so we should not be sending them any more money and weapons. Julie Vigor says, "I'm interested to know how Americans feel about the state of politics in the UK." So the extremely sad answer, Julie, is that we know almost nothing about it. I think a minority of Americans could even tell you who the PM is right now. I believe it's Keir Starmer, who I believe is Labor. And I'm somebody that pays attention to the news pretty regularly. So, we don't think about it. We're so fucking caught up in our own nonsense here that yeah. We don't have Justin Trudeau is not the Prime Minister of Canada anymore. So now we don't know who it is. All right, Carolyn says, "Sorry, it's accomplice. It's because medical students are analytical and not social." LOL. No, it's fine. I said ask me anything about politics, but there are some things that I'm not going to be knowledgeable on. And my thing is, I will never pretend to know something that I don't know. Larry says, "Do you think Trump is selling pardons?" So I want to be really clear about this, Larry. Like, he is selling pardons. Like, this is not an opinion thing. Like, we have the data, and if it was not Republicans in charge of Congress, he would 100% be impeached for that right now. Like, that is the most nakedly corrupt thing I think that we have ever seen a president do. Carmine says, "And the cable box was plugged in." The cable box was plugged in. Rowan says, "AOC or Newsom." If you're asking me like who should or will be the next Democratic nominee for president, I think they would both be great. If you're asking me whose politics I align with more, it's AOC. Mila Mayhem says, "Definitely is selling everything that's not nailed down." That is accurate. Slimer says, "Thoughts about the whole auto pen pardons?" Slimer, every single politician uses the auto pen, including Donald Trump. It is a fake scandal. It is not a real scandal whatsoever. It is nonsense. But thank you for your question, Slammer. The dude says, "So how has crony capitalism helped us?" It hasn't. Rand One says, "Should there be a limit to pardons allowed even via numbers alone?" I don't think the presidential pardon power should exist anymore. I have seen too much abuse of it. And so we either need to start regulating the shit out of it so that there are actual consequences for presidents selling pardons or pardoning all the people that tried to help him overthrow the government, or we just get rid of it entirely. Like I don't see a real valuable use case for it. J.C. Helm says, "Live a Republican. I am a progressive Democrat." Bert says, "What do you think of the Trump $1,000 self-deport program?" The entire Trump immigration deportation infrastructure is a nightmare. It is purposefully barbaric. It is violating people's human rights. Um, you know, yeah, I don't trust the government to make good on those payments. I don't trust the way that they have been operating in general. So, you know, yeah, it's all a big pile of shit. It's all horrific and against the law. Um, so yeah, if we can afford to give people $1,000 to leave, maybe we could just use that money instead to hire more immigration judges and asylum judges, unlike firing them, which is what Trump is doing to just make the problem even worse. Alrighty. Okay, you Raj says, "Do you think Trump is putting too many eggs into the AI industry?" Yes. Larry, you have my. I appreciate that. I'm not running though. Authentically her says, "Or just allow governors to pardon." I don't know, man. It's like I see that there are issues with our justice system, but I don't know if the pardon power just seems like such a blunt instrument for what I think needs to be like a massive overhaul of the criminal justice system, you know? The dude says, "Anyone priced PC RAM recently? I hear it is a lot more expensive." Tiny Hands Big Lion says they 100% will not pay that out to LMAO. Yeah, I don't trust them at all. Johnny Quad says, "Why is it a nightmare just because Joe Biden let everybody and their dog into this country?" So, Johnny, Joe Biden did not do that. If you would like to have a reasonable discussion about immigration policy, I am happy to. Just put the word yes in the chat, and I will know that you are here in good faith. Jacob Casico says, "What do you think of the Minnesota fraud?" Obviously, it was a terrible thing to steal taxpayer dollars, and the white lady who orchestrated it is currently in jail. She was arrested 3 years ago. Why are we still talking about this? Tatum Knows Pokemon says, "If it didn't cost tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to campaign, I would run for president." Well, why not try starting somewhere small? Like, why don't you do local office? Have you checked out Run for Something, Tatum? If you're under the age of 40 and you're a progressive, then they will help you mount a campaign. Your local offices and seats need you, my guy. Run for something or girl. Slimer says, "Do you think that judges have to be held accountable for the people they release?" That's a really good question, Slimer. So obviously, if we can connect the dot between like this person was let out of jail by this judge, it was that judge's call. Like it wasn't, like prescribed by sentencing guidelines or whatever. That judge could have put them in jail or could have let them free, and they let them free. Then that person went out and did a horrible, violent crime. Obviously, that looks bad for that person. But there's an expression: it is better for 100 criminals to go free than for one person to be imprisoned unjustly. Meaning, for somebody to be in jail who did not do any crimes. Like the unjustness of that is incalculable. And so, obviously, if you are somebody who's a victim of that crime, you're going to be pissed as hell at that judge. And I think you should do whatever you can to have them lose their next election or, petition your state representatives to impeach that person. But I also think that we need to have a less draconian and punitive, system of rehabilitation for criminals. Let's see here. The dude says, "Damn, I'm 47." I mean, they'll still help you. They still have great information to give. Rand One says, "Why are they talking about the Brett Favre fraud case about the same amount?" Excellent question, Rand. Why are we not talking about Rick Scott stealing millions of Medicare dollars? Why are we not talking about the Trump stealing money from a cancer charity? All seems pretty bad to me, you know? Okay, Bert says, "Do you think Nick Shirley deserves credit for exposing the whole daycare scheme?" No, his videos are made up, Berts. They have been wildly debunked. And what do we need to expose this thing for? It's been in the news for the last 3 or 4 years. It's happening in almost every state. It is, yeah, he's providing no value, Berts. He's only creating more misinformation. Lemar says, what do you think about Minnesota daycare scams? I've already talked about that. Reboka says, bro, why aren't we talking about how the government is legit manipulating us? I mean, I think the Trump administration is, obviously. Do you have something more specific that you are thinking of? Rand1 says, do you think we can ever get term limits for SCOTUS? Absolutely, Rand1. All we need to do is vote for people who will do it. That is the end game. Everything that is happening in America right now is happening because of who people are voting for. We don't have universal health care because people are voting for politicians who are not doing universal health care. We are allowing our Congress people and president to trade stocks on insider information because we have not elected people who will make that illegal. It is up to us. That is our work to do. All right, Julie Vigor says, I have to leave the discussion, but thank you for your time. Thank you, Julie. Joe Padilla says, when we win the midterms, will anybody be held accountable? So it'll be difficult, depending on how many seats Democrats have, to actually, make sure that there's legal accountability for anybody. It will be a major step in the right direction because we'll be able to have hearings. Hey, I'm a cowboy on TikTok. We'll be able to have the kinds of hearings that will force information to get on the record that could potentially be used in cases going forward. But people need to recognize that it is essential that Democrats win the midterms. We need to get as much of a advantage in the House and the Senate as we can possibly muster, but that there is still a lot more work to do after that. It sucks. We're fucking, we're at the, we're 5 yards away from our opponent's end zone. We have the entire fucking field to move. If we win the midterms, it will be a Hail Mary pass that gets us to the 50-yard line, and we will still have a ton of work to do after that. I don't watch sports, so I hope that my sports analogy was at least a little bit, made sense. And Joe Padilla, Muzz King, and Rise, and thank you so much for helping me reach my second gift goal of the day. Larry says, do you think Trump is a Russian asset? I don't know if anybody knows that for certain, but what we can say with absolute confidence is that he is doing exactly what he would be doing if he was a Russian asset. Slimer says, with all the things being exposed, I don't think Dems have a great chance of winning. Slimer, what do you mean by all the things being exposed? Are you talking about all of the redactions in the Epstein files that seem to implicate Donald Trump, but that Kash Patel seems to be trying to block? What about all of the bribes that Trump is accepting in exchange for pardons? Is that the information that's being exposed that's going to hurt Democrats, Slimer? I'm not really sure that you're here in good faith, man, because it doesn't sound like you are asking questions based on things that are actually happening. Okay, John Abbott says, we really need to stop using the phrase justice system. We don't have a justice system. We have a legal system. At no point in the nation's history has justice had anything to do with it. I think that's pretty fair. John Abbott, a little hyperbolic, but fair. Ilmoth, good to see you again. Which Ilmoth am I getting? Is it going to be chill moth or not chill moth? Do you see any issues with our current justice system and how judges are hired/appointed? Yeah, it's unfortunately prone to gamesmanship. Like the Republican Party has hacked our judiciary in a way that now they're able to skew legal results against the law and in their favor. So it's like, there are definitely issues there. And we have two different legal systems. We have one for rich people and one for the rest of us. And I don't think that that's good either, all right, definitely issues, definitely lots to work on. Thank you, Joe Patia, for helping me reach my third gift goal of the day. The dude says, do you believe in the magic bullet theory? Is that about the JFK assassination? Because if so, I do not know a ton about it. The Slimer says the current fraud, and it is being known by Tim Walz. Sorry, Slimer, but you're out of here. I'm done with your nonsense. Okay, Bert says, out of context, but is PNWs really that depressing? I would like to move there someday. What's PNWs? I don't know what that is. Rand1 says, is it even possible now to reverse course of the police surveillance state? Yes, Rand1, I believe so. Spider Kev says, what do you think of the far left? I don't really have an issue with the far left, because I don't really have an issue with their platform. Their platform is like universal health care, universal child care, free public college, cheaper housing, taxing the rich, shit like that. Where the extremists are concerned are the ones that are like, I'm not voting at all until I get a politician that matches my policy preferences 100%. And like that, I think is obviously unproductive. David says, any thoughts on Ireland and their position of joining NATO? Don't know enough about that to comment, unfortunately. So Bert's is thinking about moving to the Pacific Northwest. The Pacific Northwest is beautiful. I fucking love the Pacific Northwest. I used to go there all the time on vacations when I was a kid. I fucking love evergreen trees. The forests are incredible. Seattle's a great city. Portland's a great city. Yeah, there's a lot to love in the Pacific Northwest. Right. Uberlar says, how can we hold all judges accountable for playing in the political game? We need to impeach them. And in order to impeach them, we need to elect people that will impeach them. The dude says, Vance is going to get billions, if not trillions, in support for 2028. Yeah, because he's partnered with the tech billionaires. Joe Padilla says, last name is pronounced Padilla. Have I not been saying it that way? I know I've been doing a little bit of the noise that you get in Spanish when you get the two L's. But I can stop doing that if it bothers you, Joe. Right. Berts. Thank you, Berts. Alrighty. Okay. All right. We're all caught up over here. We're all caught over there. Rand says, do you think Ice and MAGA Barbie will ever be held accountable? Same answer, Rand. They will if we vote for people who are going to hold them accountable. It's very important that we make sure that our politicians are on the record on these issues. Benkel says, since when are social democrats far left? I think a lot of people would say that social democrats are the far left, Venkel, but if you disagree with that, that's totally fine. I'm not going to die on that hill. David says, would you change the electoral voting system, remove the electoral college? Yes, 100%. I would do it yesterday. It's dumb. And also, there is currently a thing that states can do to completely nullify the electoral college. If we get enough states to sign up for the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, electoral college will be gone. So everybody call your elected representatives and tell them to join the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact today. Dave says, just like money, corruption, both sides are on the e-files. Nobody will be accountable. I disagree with that, Dave. I think that people will be held accountable because people are pissed about this, and they are not letting go of this issue. Leroy Jenkins says, opinion on white nationalism, I'm against it. The dude says, are you in favor of UBI? Yes, I am. As we are moving towards more automation and artificial intelligence, it is going to be even more necessary that we do something to replace the income that people used to have from those jobs. Leroy Jenkins says, let's debate white nationalism. No, I'm not doing that, Leroy Jenkins. White nationalism is blatantly evil. And so I'm not going to entertain the idea that there is some cool intellectual argument for white nationalism. So yeah. Venkel says both parties serve the same. That is inaccurate. There are some people in the Democratic Party who do the bidding of the billionaire class, but the Democratic Party in general holds the billionaire class more accountable than the Republicans. They tax the billionaire class. They do not take marching orders from the billionaire class the same way that Republicans do. Leroy Jenkins says, okay, so 90% of the world is evil. No, but I'm tired of your bullshit, so you are out of here. 90% of the world is not evil, but 90% of my dick was in your mom. Unnamed person says, can you say something about Azov? I don't know who that is. Punk Toad says, we should expand voting access, but we have the technology to do it on our phones with our social security numbers. You know, I worry about how a fully digital voting world could be hacked, Punk Toad, but I do believe that we should be expanding access to the ballots. MAGA Mexican says, NYC is cooked. Do you agree? No, I do not. Luca says, what do you think about neoliberalism? I am not a neoliberal. Neoliberalism, I believe, if we're operating on the same definition, is this kind of centrist Republican light version of Democrats that are much more billionaire and corporation friendly. I think that philosophy has failed. And I think that we need to do more to hold the rich and powerful accountable and to make more even our wild income inequality. That is honestly the driver of a lot of the issues that we are facing today. JP, it's actually two. I told a German troll earlier. It's that I had sex with his mother. Rand one says, can Citizens United be revoked in our lifetime? Absolutely. And again, Rand, it just has to do with how much work you and I do and how many other people we convince to do the work with us, to vote for the people that will undo Citizens United. Okay, Venkel says, Malcolm X said the biggest enemy of the civil rights movement is the moderate white liberal. Yeah, I think it's a little hyperbolic, but I think there are some accuracies to that. Okay, Kira Kills Zionism says, is the DNC paying you? Either way, that's how it comes off. No, the DNC doesn't pay content creators to go out there and talk about how great the DNC is. And I would love for you to tell me what you think I have said as a progressive Democrat that the DNC would love for me would love to pay me to be saying. NA League support says dated political views. I mean, I'm up to date. I'm pretty sure I'm up to date. Hope and Bloom says, can you explain Citizens United? Absolutely. So Citizens United, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so this is a real non-lawyer's version of explaining it. But Citizens United basically cracked open a world of rich people being able to make unlimited financial donations to support political outcomes of their choosing. Before Citizens United, there were limitations on how much money individuals could spend on political messaging and political candidates. And the Republican Party and the right-wing Supreme Court justices have been steadily trying to erode those regulations because they know that when billionaires can spend more money on elections, then more right-wing politicians will be elected. They will nominate and sit more right-wing judges, and therefore the right-wing billionaire class will be in charge of America for the rest of time. So Citizens United basically said that money equals speech, and we are not allowed to regulate speech. Ergo, we are not allowed to regulate how people spend their money regarding political messaging. It was disastrous, and elections increased in cost like 100-fold afterwards. We are seeing massive influence from the billionaire class and well-funded lobbying organizations in a way that was not possible before Citizens United. Alrighty. Also, that corporations are people, so that they can also spend unlimited funds. Thank you for reminding me of that fact, JP and Rand. Very much appreciate that. And also thank you to Joe, Padilla, Beef, and Muzzking for helping me reach my 4th gift goal of the day, I think, which means it's the most exciting part of the live stream, everybody. We're moving to finger hearts. It's finger hearts o'clock, y'all. Okay. I Peach in 5th grade says, why is the median price of a home $870,000 in California? Because California is a great place to live. And everybody wants to live here, which makes the housing really expensive. Also, for decades, we have not been building enough houses in California, and so real estate prices have skyrocketed. Alrighty, let's see here. We've got Luke, N1C8Y, says, this question is for Paul. You should do a book club and start with the Parents Team Bears. That's pretty cute. Ilmoth says, what the hell are you talking about? I don't know. Would you like to, would you like to get into it? Okay, Venkel says, thoughts on capitalism. I think capitalism can work so long as it's regulated and so long as we pair it with things like communism and socialism, which we already have a little bit here in America. Thank you, Joe and David, for helping me reach my first finger hearts of the day. I think that unregulated capitalism has wrought incalculable damage on America and the world. And so we need to be regulating it, and we should force capitalism to compete with communist companies that are employee owned and socialist government-run agencies like Universal Healthcare. Dave says, never voted on party politics. Never voted on party, but policies. Identity politics is weird. I completely agree with that, Dave. But if you vote for a Democrat in your district, that helps every other Democrat that gets elected around the country. And so if you vote on policies, you have to recognize that the parties have wildly different policies. So, you can vote based on the person in the primary, but if you're voting based on the person in the general, you are basically doing identity politics. Let me know what you think about that, Dave. Punk Toad says it's wild that a felon cannot vote for president but can be elected as one. Yeah, it's the Air Bud rule, which is basically there's not a law that says you can't run for president if you're a convicted felon who hasn't paid their debt to society yet. And thank you, Joe and Muzz, for helping me reach my second Finger Hearts goal. Alrighty. Break up monopolies. Completely agree with that. Thoughts on capitalism. Rand one says we already crossed the line for climate action. It's never too late to do something about climate action. Basically, the numbers of like 2 and 2.5% above the median global temperature, those were an attempt to create a line to say things are going to get really, really bad if we cross this line. And we have. So now we have to deal with the consequences of that. And there will be many. We're already seeing them, with diseases that were previously restricted to certain parts of the globe are now spreading more easily. Food is harder to grow. And, sea levels are rising. Storms are worse. It's just going to get worse, unfortunately. Alrighty. Ilmoth says, do you disagree, though, John, that those were the best examples of justice in history? Slavery changing shape and still continue to this day? No, that's not an example of justice at all, much less one of the best examples. Yeah, I'm with John on this, Ilmoth. Okay, Venkel says, you can't regulate capitalism. You can't. It has been in the past. It will. Minimum wage is a regulation on capitalism. Right. Let's see here. Daisy Zooman says, why are so many people leaving California? So that's actually an old data point. For the last 3 years, more people have been moving into California than leaving. Venkel, every single right we have as people have been achieved by struggle. I mean, I suppose an argument could be made, but I don't know. I don't know if it's as cut and dry as all that. Beef says, I just left. All right, well, no one will miss you, Beef. Let's see here. All right, everybody, I'm going to start wrapping things up. I went a little long today. Thank you so much for all of your likes and shares and questions, everybody. I am only able to do the show because of your support. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. So we will see you guys on Monday at around the same time. And I hope that everybody has a great weekend. If you want more, if you have a question that I was not able to answer on this live stream, DMs are open. You could also hit me up via my Discord or email me through my website. I want to be a resource for you guys to be more informed and more involved in politics. And so if there's any way that I can do that by answering your question or responding to an email, I want you to use me. Use me until I'm all used up. Use me and abuse me. If you want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. And there are lots of fun ways to do it. You can join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Link is in the bio. You can buy things from my store. Link is in the bio. And you can send gifts and become subscribers and super fans on TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube. If you're an Amazon Prime subscriber and you subscribe to my Twitch channel using your Amazon Prime account, I get $2. It costs you $0. It is a great free way to support the show financially. But obviously, we're all struggling under the Donald Trump cost of living crisis. And so obviously, if you don't have any money to toss to me, then that is completely fine. I'm just happy that you are here. 312MQ says, how was Avatar? There were things about it that were really cool, and there were things about it that were extremely stupid. There's some poor kid in that movie who really should not have been there. It's not his fault, but his whole character and his whole part is terrible, and it's just weird and fucking hilarious. We had a great time, but yeah, boy, oh boy, are those movies silly. Okay, let's see here. Any last thing I want to get into? Christopher Houston says, so Sea Right is Rising. Saw a picture of Statue of Liberty 59 years ago. Still not 1 inch. That is not how we measure sea levels rising, Christopher. So I don't really think that you care, though. I think that you're trying to prove that climate change isn't real. But yeah, what you just said is not a valid argument against it. Alrighty, everybody. Thank you again for being here. Please do all the work. Check out the Discord. MAGA Mexican says thoughts on Zoran. Didn't I block you already, Mexican? MAGA Mexican? Uh, Everybody have a great weekend. Do the work. Be good to yourselves. And I will see you guys on Monday. Same bad time, same bad channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.